I'm thrilled to bring my friend Camille Walker on the podcast with us today. She is someone who I relate to on so many levels. And as this conversation moves forward, I think you'll understand why. Maybe she validates my love for creation and for continual growth and having these meaningful conversations on podcasts. She's also a podcast host, and I got to be on her show a while back. She's Call Me CEO podcast. And I got on the podcast to see because at one point I saw something come up and it was like 100 and something episodes. How many episodes are you in?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I couldn't find it.
I think I'm at 120 because I passed 100 at the end of last year.
Which is just so cool. Such an accomplishment. And also it's funny because, you look and I saw like a little square. I don't even know what it was, but it had like the episode number on it. But when you go to the show, it doesn't really say exactly what episode your latest one was. So I was like, I know it was over 100. And that is just such an accomplishment to be able to commit to something and to continue. And also I was like, if I would have listened to myself back when I wanted to, then, I could have been there. And not in this comparison way, but it's a good reminder that when you have the idea, like making the moves, starting is going to just get you, even if you don't have all the answers, even if you don't know everything, right? It's like, I didn't know any more when I just finally said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I didn't know anymore. I just got brave enough to do it. And so it's all fine. But I just when I saw that, I was like, good for you. I think that's so awesome. So she, like I said, she's a podcast host. She also for the last decade has been building like an online website, mymommystyle.com, where she shares all things motherhood recipes. She is coaching women in their own businesses, becoming virtual assistants, which there is such a high demand for. So I think that is genius. You are a mentor to women. I mean, she basically does a lot of different things that all really support each other. And I think that's kind of why you feel so relatable to me, is because I sort of do the same thing. It's like I have my hands in a lot of different places. I'm also a mom. You're a mom. How many kids do you have again?
4.
So we both have 4 kids. Here we go. We got 4 kids. We're running a podcast. We have some online business of sorts. But also we're like really supporting women. And I just think everything that you're doing is so great. So I'm excited to hear kind of like where this came from and what the process looked like for you and what you've learned, what words you would encourage other people in their own experience of growing this business. A 6-figure business at home is a big deal for someone whose priority is to be able to stay home, to have some flexibility, and also do some soul-filling work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that intro. Yes. And I feel very akin to you too. I remember, I think the first time we met was when we were carpooling to an event, an influencer event. And they said, do you know Chelsea Christensen? I'm like, no. And she's like, what? You guys would have so much to talk about. You have so much in common. I can't believe you don't know each other after all these years. And I'm like,
that's so funny.
Well, I'm thrilled to meet her. And since then it's just been, I feel like we could hang out and talk about things for forever because we have so much. I really love that we both have embraced the creativity and that you can be multifaceted. You don't have to just pick one thing and be like, this is me forever. I chose this one. So now it's me forever, like photography or design or creating a blog or whatever it was, because we are multidimensional people. And so embracing that about ourselves is a power.
And as we grow, as we learn new things, it takes us to a place where we have new offerings. And a lot of times we just get stuck in the comfortable of this. I know this works. I know this feels good. I know what the results look like, instead of saying, okay, I'm at this new place where I've expanded my knowledge, my experience, and now I see how I can add value in a different way, and being brave enough to step into that.
Yeah. And, like you were saying in the intro where you thought, oh man, if I would have started when she did, I would be this far along. I think it's so easy in our lives to look side to side and think that and be like, oh gosh, why didn't I just do it when I had that nudge? And I think that honoring that intuition and taking that leap of faith is huge, but then also giving yourself the grace of, well, maybe that just wasn't the right time yet. Totally. And that's a piece of it too. And that's perfectly okay. So I think that's, those are lessons that you grow through what you go through. Right.
Yeah,
so it's just a process of discovering who you are at all the different levels of your life, which is beautiful.
Yeah. And I always say, like, in order to create something, you have to create space. And I think, like, at that time, the desire was there, the readiness was there. It probably could have been great at that time, but I hadn't yet created the actual physical space in my life to be able to execute in a way that I would have wanted to.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so true.
Yes. Also, we forgot to mention, she actually married someone from my hometown. So so it's like, I know her in-law family, which is so funny because we're all just so connected in ways that we just don't even know or understand. But it's really fun to see him in that, married to you with these kids. And like, it's just really cool to see people grown up in their lives that you saw as children. So
as kids. Yeah. It's kind of trippy.
It is so crazy. Well, as you look back over your journey of growing, like where you started to where you are now. So you originally started with the blog, right? Many of us began on a blog. And it was funny because when we were starting blogs, it was like, no one knew, like there was no such thing as an influencer. There was no such thing as like even money being made for traffic coming to your blog. There's no such thing as like ads or, I mean, it was brand new, right? So you go and you start this blog, and like, I would love for you to kind of just like walk us through the beginning of your business and your intention or what you were hoping to grow in that time.
Yeah. Oh, I love taking a trip back down memory lane because it's such a piece of who I am, but also I love to see how it's changed and morphed over time. So thank you for the opportunity. So I had started my blog in I think it was 2011, could have been the beginning of 2012. And I am a formally trained family and consumer science education teacher. That is what so all of those home ec classes of like cooking and sewing and relationships and finance and, all of it, interior design, those are all, again, multifaceted creator where I'm like, oh, I love people. I love the relationship aspect of it, like who we are as humans, as developing. I love space and creating space and all these things. But more than anything, I really wanted to be a mom and I wanted to be at home with my kids. And so upon graduation, I had actually been in the mortgage industry for 5 years and I loved it. And I found out that I could actually hold my own with finance and sales, which was like a huge surprise, like a huge shock. Cause I had just gone from being in these classes with all these women and predominantly, more quote unquote female-led roles, and then went into the world of men and business and finance and actually realized I could hold my own. I was, it was a really eye-opening experience for me of becoming who I am today. Yeah. But that comes into play later. So once I had gone home and I was with the kids, it was about 3 years in that I thought I had now had my second child. And I thought, I love this. I love being at home with my kids, but I need something more. I need something different. I need something that I can feel where I'm a lifelong learner. I love to study and share and teach. That's just a part of my makeup. And so I had heard about this blogging thing and I thought, well, gosh, wouldn't that be fun to gather up my best girlfriends and college roommate and my sister and my cousin? There were 7 of us. And I said, let's do this thing. And let's just see where it goes. We're going to show our opinions. And at first it was going to be called Sweet Solstice because we were talking about different seasons of your life and perspectives. Awesome. After about 4 months or even a couple months, 3 of the people left. They're like, this is like a job and we're not getting paid because we weren't. That was before people made a dime. Yeah. And then for a number of years, it was 4 and then 3, then 2, then 1. And that was over the course of maybe 7 years. And so I've been doing it on my own now for the past 6 years, and it's still trucking along. I do have contracted workers that help me with different pieces of the business so that I could expand and grow into other things that I am now sharing online. But I've done everything you can imagine, from like a live cooking show twice a week to a natural birthing series on YouTube to recipes of all different sorts that you can still find. I mean, Pinterest is still a very healthy, lively part of our traffic. And I say our because I think of it more as like my family business,
Yeah.
but it really is just me. I guess I just speak of it that way. And so that led into influencing online, working with different brands. I've worked with so many wonderful, amazing brands. I traveled with Disney for about 5 years, and worked with big brands like Walmart and Target, like all the ones that you can imagine. And it's so fun. And my kids were a very big part of that, being a part of the content creation and even photography. And I paid them as you would an employee, which was a really fun experience that way. And then about 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, actually, it was in the end of 2019 that I launched my podcast, because I realized so much of what I had been able to do with building a business online and being at home with my kids is a gift that I wanted to share and give other women the opportunity to do, because so many were coming to me and saying, I want to build a business from home, make money from home. What should I do? And it was where I was like, well, gosh, I wouldn't tell you to start a blog right now, because the world of blogging has changed so much. But there's more opportunity than ever to grow business online. So that's where my 60 Days to VA course was built. And also the flip side of coaching entrepreneurs and business owners from Call Me CEO that are building businesses online. So it's all about finding that balance as a mother, what works best for you, what inspires you. And then, of course, I love sharing stories of women that have built businesses and how they balance their lives to create a cohesive whole to being truly who they are at all capacities.
Yeah. I think a couple like points that I really want to touch on is that you said that you had a desire to build, like, you're like, I love this. I love being home. And I have this desire to have something that's mine that feels like outside of this. And I think that this comes true for a lot of women and mothers. They're in this season and they're loving, or maybe they're not loving. It can be both sides. Maybe it's really hard. Maybe it's really lonely, but they're in this season and they have this thought, like, what is there for me? Like, what about me? Is there something that I want to be passionate about? There's something that I want to grow, something I want to learn about, something I want to make my own money. Like, what did it, and I think that a lot of times, there can be some guilt that comes with that, some shame, like, I can't be fulfilled and happy in motherhood if I have a desire for anything else. But that's so wrong, because you are a human, like, you are still you. And if your life, right, or if you have a season where you just want to fully like enjoy the moments, that is okay too, right? There's so many levels and it's so personal, but like, I just really want to bring attention to the fact that if you have a desire to create, that's okay. If you have a desire for something alongside motherhood, it's probably for a reason. There's probably a part of you that maybe feels abandoned, that maybe needs to be nourished and loved and cultivated something, and so I say, listen to that. And you mentioned that you wanted to make sure that women, I felt what I heard, you didn't say these words specifically, was that they're creating businesses that lead from their priority first. So it's like they know what they want. They want to be able to have flexibility. They want to be physically in the home. They want to, love and nurture their children, but they also want to grow something. And so being able to create something that's working from your priorities is kind of key to my focus, but also it sounds like your focus in helping guide women to what they want.
Yeah. I think one of the best, most poignant things I've ever learned is that mom guilt or shame comes when we put other people's priorities or ignore our own values of the way we really want to be spending our time. And I think that can be, I think that there needs to, especially if you've grown up in a predominantly conservative community that very much puts women in a constraint of like, this is the way you should feel, or this is the way you should act, or this is the way it should be. Or maybe it's just perceived that way, that like we're putting someone else's preconceived notions of what success as a mother looks like. And who is that person? And I think that mom guilt or shame is when it's not aligning with who we truly are and what we truly want. And it does mean that you need to create clear boundaries of, so for maybe for you, maybe for someone listening, you just want 3 hours a week. where you get to create something that's just your own. And maybe or not, that turns into something that helps bring money into the home. Maybe for you, it's developing wellness and health and really getting in touch with yourself or your spirituality or whatever it is. Or it could be on the other scale where you're like, no, I want to create something and I want it to be industrious. I want to feel productive in that way. And that's something that you too can align that with your value and say, yeah, that's actually how I feel. And I think that reflection and taking that time or that space to ask those hard questions can be really easy to forget, when you're in the minutia of like nap times and bottles and babies and pregnancy or whatever it is. And just like you, through the course of, the last decade of raising these wonderful children, there are just pockets of time that we can work with if you choose to do it from home or not. I mean, I think there are these pockets that you can work with, but that doesn't mean that slow, consistent progress isn't progress. Like those little tiny bits add up. And I would say, I'm not one of those creators where I came out of the gate and I had 1 million followers and it was just like raining money on me. No, like absolutely not. Do I have hundreds of thousands of followers now? Yes, but it's taken me a decade and it's been showing up consistently and showing up even when it feels like no one's listening
and even when all of the people who you originally started the blog with, as those people fell off, it would have been really easy for you to just be like, blah, 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 okay, fine. This isn't working. But you were consistent. And I think there is so much power in consistency. I was actually talking to another business owner last night, and she's kind of had her store for like 13 years. And there's other stores that maybe have come out in the last few years and they've like grown super fast because the reach is a lot like more available to creators now. But we were talking and I said, I was thinking about this the other day, and there is power in the longevity of growth. Like I look back at the lessons that came from spending 15, 16, 17 years of creating businesses and navigating and shifting and changing. And while if someone said, do you want to grow in 1 year or do you want to grow in 17? I would probably in that moment say like, give me 1 year, please. Thank you. Like I'll take, I probably, if I'm being honest, I probably would, that would be my hope and my desire is like, oh yeah, sure. That sounds easy. But there is so much power and so much like knowledge and wealth outside of even money that comes from that deep learning, developing, growing, that I would almost challenge that when the quick growth comes, you actually miss out on the foundation of a lot that you have to, that you're forced to go back to and deal with eventually. And so there's like pros and cons to both, but there is real power in that slow and steady, consistent growth.
Yeah. And, for me, I was really grateful that I had a business that if I was going through a rough patch with health or with a baby or with a pregnancy, that I could take a step back and the roof didn't cave in, that I had created something that like I was my own boss, and it was a thing that I could put my family first. And we learn, of course, about the balls and is it a glass ball? Is it a rubber ball? Which one needs to drop, and evaluating that. And that's a part of it too. But I think that, the slow growth, you really figure out where those weak spots are, and also times that you can take a bit of a retreat or a requiem, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point is like it gives you permission, because it isn't this all of a sudden you have this multi-million-dollar business and there's no, it's like the golden handcuffs I've heard it referred to, that sometimes when something gets too big before we're ready for it, it's like these golden handcuffs that hold us hostage because we can't like walk away, but also like we're not fully prepared for it. So it's a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
So was there a time when you, like in these last 10, 12, however many years you've really been doing this, where you were like, is this even worth it?
Oh yeah. I've had to pivot and reevaluate a lot of times where I had created something. A good example of this was, there was a time that I had a son who was 4 years old and started having some really aggressive behavior and really dark words that he was using. He was only 4. And I noticed that the thing was that what was really changing his behavior and his self-talk, or the way he was talking, was linked with his screen time. And I know that this can be really triggering for some people, because they'll be like, oh, please, which I had 2 kids before him, and the effects were totally different. This child was very unique, and it was very tied. And I thought, we as a family went through a period that we called the screen freeze, and we did 30 days off of screens. And I focused on the foundation of health for my child. And, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you communicating? Are you moving your body? And are we fueling your mind, where we're reducing screen time? Those are the 5 pillars that we discovered. And it was life-changing. It changed my life. It changed his life. It taught me so much as a mom. So I put together this screen freeze program, and I brought it to market, put so much time into it, and it did not sell. It was like, the message of screen time, especially at that time, it was, gosh, how long ago would it have been now? About 5 years ago. I think that it really, either people felt like they had it in check, or they felt so guilty about it, they didn't want to talk about it. Like it was just very much this taboo subject.
I can see
that. And so, I put it on the shelf, and I created the Time for Us journals, which were amazing and wonderful. And I had such a powerful reception to it. But it was right during 2020, and fulfillment was a disaster.
You're like, I could sell 1 million, but I can't even get a piece of paper to sell you.
No. Yeah. Like it was like stuck in customs, and like, I couldn't do the fulfillment. And I had all these people that were upset that they didn't get it in time for Christmas, and, all these different things. And I thought, I do not have the bandwidth for still maintaining these online businesses and this fulfillment piece. It was like not in my wheelhouse. I didn't have the infrastructure of having people there to like help me with that piece of it. So I thought, okay, well, I could either keep going down this road and put more effort into that fulfillment piece, or I could put it on Amazon and refer to it and have it available for a lot less money. And it's an amazing resource. So I took it from that fulfillment and put it onto Amazon, and it's an amazing resource. And I'm really proud of it, but it's something that I had to pivot from. And those are just a couple examples. Like I've done so many different things, but I feel like every process I've been through, especially in these last few years with mental health and having a teenager, it's really interesting, because I've always shared so much about parenting and tips and what to do and how to do it. But as your kids get older, their stories are not your stories. And so you have to really filter and be careful about protecting that space. So it's interesting. And so that's when I switched more over to, well, let's focus on helping mothers building business, because that way I can take the focus off my kids and them being on camera and give them the privacy that they need. And I can still run the blog, but I won't make it as personal. And so I had to redirect that way, because I really respect my children's stories being their private stories and only sharing what they want. So
that's a really tricky thing. And I've experienced that as well. Like when your children get to the age where they're people who are on social media are giving them feedback or talking to them or saying like, oh, I saw this, or, oh, did you know your mom this, or whatever. And my kids aren't like on Instagram. And so some people use it like, I know more about your mom than you do. But then some people use it as like, I like how embarrassing that this or for your mom, or, so it is kind of tricky when and I don't even feel like I'm like that much open about my children, but it's still, it's an interesting thing to navigate when you have kids and you're on a social media platform where you're sharing a lot. I love that you've been able to take it though and pivot, and how cool that I see you kind of growing with your kids, and then they're growing in their way and you're still continually growing in your way. And I think the cool part about that for me is that we don't have to hold tight to what the growth is going to look like. But when we are committed to growing, so there's seasons of growth where you were, growing your blog and you were growing your children alongside it and they were a part of it, but you just kept taking like the next steps that felt right. So your parenting child journal, that's an amazing resource. And that was a way that you guys were still kind of like growing together while you're growing in your own ways. But it's like that commitment to growth in whatever form it needs to be in that season, I think is the most powerful takeaway of that.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because like any mom, you want to show up and be there and be that person that your kids really need. And one of my favorite things that I say to my kids all the time is, there are so many times that we have frustrating times, either as a parent, a sister, brother, husband, daughter, whomever. And if they're frustrated with something, or if they're in a spot where they feel like they're stuck and they don't quite know what the next best step is, I'll say, listen, this is your first time being 14, and it's new and it's tricky and there are lessons to learn. And it's also my first time being a mother of a 14-year-old, and we're figuring this out together. I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But as long as we're communicating and working through this, it's going to be okay. And I think that as a child, when they're learning to walk, you say, you didn't get mad at yourself when you fell down. You just got right back up and you tried again. And that was a part of just being human, is learning and falling and getting back up again. And I think it's so beautiful that we get to go through it together.
I love that. And I think that phrase, that humble of like the humility of saying, I'm doing this for the first time. You're doing this for the first time, but we're better when we learn together and when we forgive each other and when we are open and honest and have that conversation. And that's something that I really try to do it with my own children. And I think it softens all the conflicts, right? If there's, because it's true. It is absolutely true that we're all doing this for the first time. And even if it's your second time parenting a 14-year-old, it's still the first time you've parented this 14-year-old.
Yeah. Because they're all so different.
Because they're all so different. And that really does makes it interesting and it makes it challenging. And I have twin girls that are the exact same age, 5 minutes separation, but they have to be parented completely different. They react and respond. They experience things differently. So it is true that we are doing everything for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Something else that I was thinking about as you were talking about your kids growing and you growing and you like having the desire to do something is like, if you were to sit down and write a letter to your child or your children, and you're like walking them through their life and you're like, I hope that in elementary school, these are the things. And I hope that in, when you get to high school, that this is your experience and that these are the things you learn and whatever. And then what I hope as you go into adulthood, I hope that you like focus all your time and energy on other people for the rest of your life. Like, would we write that? Like, we hope that you grow up and you abandon yourself and you stop worrying about yourself and stop, right? Like would that be our wish for them, that they go to a place where, I'm not saying don't be a good person. I'm not saying don't invest in your children and the people around you and love and serve in a beautiful way, but we would never leave out in that letter. We would never leave out like this. I hope you see your gifts and your talents. I hope that you lean into them and that you acknowledge them and that you're willing to take those and use those and continue to grow and learn and thrive, right? That would be the message. And so if we're a mom right now and we're sitting and it's hard for us to give ourselves permission to be like that, it's like we would want that for them. And I believe that they would want that for us. And also we would want that for us, right? We're giving whatever we want for other people is truly what we want for ourselves. Whatever we want for our kids, it's actually a mirror showing us like, this is important. And so like, maybe that's a little permission of like, oh, you're right. I would never expect, or my biggest dream for my child wouldn't be that she forgets what makes her come alive, or, or that she would stop learning and growing and nurturing parts of herself that are a gift to the world. So I don't know, just had that thought and I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny because as you were saying that, what would you want them to learn? I was thinking, well, gosh, I would hope that they would learn to love themselves first, because you can't really give in a fullness that really matters until you develop that relationship with yourself first. And I think it's so fascinating to me as an adult woman now, looking around and having friends my own age saying, I'm just now figuring out how to love myself. And that's why I haven't been able to be happy in XYZ situation or relationship, because that foundation wasn't built first. So as you were going through that and saying that, I was like, yeah. And then also, if you do identify that, then at that point in your adult life, loving yourself means giving yourself that time to be who you are, who you truly are, so that you can give to other people. So yes, 100%. I agree. I was nodding. And yes, I love it.
Because we do get that, like, the message that like to love ourselves is to give ourselves, it's like
everything.
to give everything to everyone else, if that's like the best of us. But when we are filled, when we are connected, when we know and understand ourselves, and when we make sure that we are nurturing our own selves, then it is absolutely true that we're able to give the best of us to everyone around us.
Yes.
So. That's so good. Well, I know that you have so many other words of wisdom that we could probably talk all day long, because you have your podcast and she has. So I can send people to your podcast to continue listening your words of wisdom, the Call Me CEO podcast. And also you are on Instagram. You have 2 accounts. So
yes. So CamilleWalker.co is kind of like my more mom life and blog posts stuff with some of the podcasts sprinkled in. That's also my domain, CamilleWalker.co. So they match. And then my podcast handle is Call Me CEO Podcast on Instagram to get all of the direct links to all of those episodes as well.
Yes. Awesome. And so we have to end that podcast. And this is something that I know you will relate to, because it is so true for us. Like this idea of fire in her heart, peace in her soul, and dancing with both of those things, but not at the cost of one or the other. And so what is something that is currently lighting your heart on fire?
Gosh, this week has been so fun, because I have the energy back from recovering from a surgery I had earlier this year. And I'm starting to offer up matching my virtual assistant graduates with busy entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
And I posted about it on Facebook this week, and I got like 20 responses immediately. And I was like, whoa, like it was kind of overwhelming. But then after having the phone calls and matching people up and helping women on both sides, it is such fulfilling work that is cool. Lighting me up. Like, I'm just like, yes. And I'm talking people who I talked with someone last week who made over 3 million, and someone this week who is barely making, I think maybe 30,000 or something, but I'm able to help both parties. So cool. Where I'm like, let's help take some load off and help you with either developing a business that gives you the flexibility you need, or also matches you up with someone who could help you. And so that's awesome. Just been, I just love it, because I really know that it's making a difference in these women's lives.
Yeah, it is. We all need each other. And it's so awesome when one business can support another business in a way that we can be, operating from our own zone of genius. And then we're both making money and growing because of the support. That's awesome. I love it. And what is something that you do to protect the peace of your soul?
So for me, it's usually connecting with nature. I get out every single day, and I love to hike or to walk, or I feel like nature helps me to feel close to God, and also close to my own inner voice and knowing. And so that's a place where I feel peace, is in nature.
Oh, that's so good. And I relate to you on that as well. So we are just like kind of like, some soul sisterhood going on, which I love. I love that. I love to support and encourage and like learn and just know other people who share in the same way. So thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your experience. I hope that you guys will follow her and go listen to her podcast and to learn from her and watch as she leads. If you're looking for something to do from home, learn how to be a virtual assistant. There is such a need for that you can support other people in their business while using the talents and the skills that you have. And also, of course, check out the journal, the Parent to Child Journal. I am such a fan of that open communication. Children are willing to share so much more through their written words than their voices, because it feels a little less scary sometimes. And it's just, I've been able to do that with my own kids. And I think that's so wonderful that you created that. So many good things. I'm just grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
That we are nurturing our own selves, then it is absolutely true that we're able to give the best of us to everyone around us.
Yes.
So. That's so good. Well, I know that you have so many other words of wisdom that we could probably talk all day long, because you have your podcast and she has. So I can send people to your podcast to continue listening your words of wisdom, the Call Me CEO podcast. And also you are on Instagram. You have 2 accounts. So
Yes. So CamilleWalker.co is kind of like my more mom life and blog post stuff with some of the podcasts sprinkled in. That's also my domain, CamilleWalker.co. So they match. And then my podcast handle is Call Me CEO Podcast on Instagram to get all of the direct links to all of those episodes as well.
Yes. Awesome. And so we have to end that podcast. And this is something that I know you will relate to because it is so true for us. Like this idea of fire in her heart, peace in her soul, and dancing with both of those things, but not at the cost of one or the other. And so what is something that is currently lighting your heart on fire?
Gosh, this week has been so fun because I have the energy back from recovering from a surgery I had earlier this year. And I'm starting to offer up matching my virtual assistant graduates with busy entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
And I posted about it on Facebook this week and I got like 20 responses immediately. And I was like, whoa, like it was kind of overwhelming. But then after having the phone calls and matching people up and helping women on both sides, it is such fulfilling work that is cool. Lighting me up. Like, I'm just like, yes. And I'm talking people who I talked with someone last week who made over 3 million and someone this week who is barely making, I think maybe 30,000 or something, but I'm able to help both parties so cool. Where I'm like, let's help take some load off and help you with either developing a business that gives you the flexibility you need or also matches you up with someone who could help you. And so that's awesome. Just been, I just love it because I really know that it's making a difference in these women's lives.
Yeah, it is. We all need each other. And it's so awesome when one business can support another business in a way that we can be, operating from our own zone of genius. And
yes.
Then we're both making money and growing because of the support. That's awesome. I love it. And what is something that you do to protect the peace of your soul?
So for me, it's usually connecting with nature. I get out every single day and I love to hike or to walk or I feel like nature helps me to feel close to God and also close to my own inner voice and knowing. And so that's a place where I feel peace is in nature.
Oh, that's so good. And I relate to you on that as well. So we are just like kind of like, some soul sisterhood going on, which I love. I love that. I love to support and encourage and like learn and just know other people who share in the same way. So thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your experience. I hope that you guys will follow her and go listen to her podcast and to learn from her and watch as she leads. If you're looking for something to do from home, learn how to be a virtual assistant. There is such a need for that you can support other people in their business while using the talents and the skills that you have. And also, of course, check out the journal, the Parent to Child Journal. I am such a fan of that open communication. Children are willing to share so much more through their written words than their voices because it feels a little less scary sometimes. And it's just, I've been able to do that with my own kids. And I think that's so wonderful that you created that. So many good things. I'm just grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.